Sarah had always been intrigued by the abandoned house next door. It stood as a silent sentinel, its windows boarded up, and its once grand facade crumbling with neglect. The rumors that circulated around the neighborhood only fueled her curiosity, and she often found herself gazing at it, wondering what secrets it held. One stormy night, as lightning split the sky and thunder rumbled in the distance, Sarah awoke to strange noises coming from the direction of the abandoned house. At first, she dismissed it as the howling wind, but the sounds persisted, growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. Intrigued and a little scared, Sarah climbed out of bed and made her way to the window. Peering through the rain-streaked glass, she could just make out shadows moving within the abandoned house. Her heart raced with a mixture of fear and excitement as she contemplated the mystery unfolding next door. Without giving herself a chance to second-guess, she threw on a coat and slipped out into the storm. The wind whipped at her hair, and rain soaked through her clothes as she approached the old house. The front door creaked open ominously as she stepped onto the porch, revealing a hallway engulfed in darkness beyond. With a deep breath, Sarah crossed the threshold into the unknown. The air inside was heavy with the scent of mildew and decay, and Sarah shivered as a chill ran down her spine. She fumbled for her flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. As she ventured further into the house, the floorboards groaned under her weight, and she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Suddenly, she heard footsteps echoing from the upper floor, sending a jolt of fear through her veins. She hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with thoughts of retreat. But something compelled her to press on. With each step, the staircase seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness closing in around her like a suffocating cloak. Finally, she reached the top and found herself in a room filled with the remnants of a life long forgotten. Dust-covered furniture lay scattered about, the ghosts of happier times now reduced to mere relics. But what caught her attention was a faint glow emanating from the far corner of the room. As she drew closer, her heart pounding in her chest, she saw a figure huddled in the shadows. It was an elderly woman, her frail form barely visible in the dim light. Sarah's voice caught in her throat as she tried to speak, but the woman remained silent, her eyes vacant and hollow. Just then, Sarah heard a voice behind her, causing her to jump in fright. She turned to see her neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, standing in the doorway with a look of concern on her face. Mrs. Jenkins had lived in the neighborhood for decades, and her wrinkled face was etched with lines of wisdom and experience. She explained that the house was haunted by the spirits of its former occupants who had met tragic ends at the hands of an unspeakable evil. Sarah listened in rapt attention as Mrs. Jenkins recounted the chilling tale of the house's dark past, each word sending shivers down her spine. Terrified yet oddly fascinated, Sarah fled the house and never returned. But from that day on, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched whenever she passed by the abandoned house next door. And though she never discovered the full truth of what lurked within its walls, the memory of that fateful night would haunt her for years to come. John and Emily had finally found their dream home in the quiet suburbs, a quaint little house with a picket fence and a yard perfect for their growing family. But their happiness was short-lived when they met their next-door neighbors, the Smiths. From the moment they moved in, the Smiths made their presence known in the most obnoxious ways possible. Their house was a constant source of noise and disruption, with loud music blaring well into the night and raucous parties spilling out into the street. John and Emily tried to be patient, hoping that the noise would die down once the Smiths settled in, but their hopes were quickly dashed. As the days turned into weeks, the situation only grew worse. Their yard became a dumping ground for trash and debris, with garbage bags piling up against the fence and attracting rats and other vermin. John and Emily tried to confront the Smiths about their behavior, but their attempts were met with nothing but mockery and derision. Frustrated and at their wits' end, John and Emily reached out to the authorities for help, but without any concrete evidence of wrongdoing, there was little they could do. Meanwhile, the harassment continued unabated, with the Smiths escalating their campaign of terror with each passing day. Things took a sinister turn when John and Emily started receiving threatening letters in their mailbox, each one filled with profanity and violent threats. It was clear that the Smiths wanted them gone, and they would stop at nothing to make it happen. Terrified for their safety, John and Emily installed security cameras around their property and double-checked the locks on their doors and windows every night before bed. But the constant fear and anxiety took its toll on their mental and emotional well-being, leaving them feeling trapped and powerless in their own home. Despite their best efforts to ignore the Smiths and carry on with their lives, the harassment only grew worse until it reached a point where they could no longer bear it. With heavy hearts and a sense of defeat weighing them down, John and Emily made the difficult decision to sell their house and move away, leaving behind their nightmare neighbors and the life they had once dreamed of. But even as they drove away from the house for the last time, they couldn't shake the feeling that the Smiths would continue to haunt them, their malevolent presence lingering like a dark shadow over their lives. As the weeks passed, the situation with the Smiths only seemed to worsen. Their once peaceful neighborhood had transformed into a battleground, with tensions running high and animosity festering between neighbors. John and Emily found themselves living in a constant state of fear, never knowing when the next outburst from the Smiths would occur. Sleepless nights became the norm as they lay awake, listening to the cacophony of noise emanating from next door, their nerves stretched to the breaking point. But it wasn't just the noise and disruption that made life unbearable. It was the feeling of being under siege in their own home, the sense of helplessness that gnawed at them day and night. They tried to find solace in each other's company, but even that proved difficult as the stress of their situation took its toll on their relationship. Desperate for relief, John and Emily reached out to their other neighbors for support, hoping to find strength in numbers. But they soon discovered that they weren't the only ones suffering at the hands of the Smiths. Stories emerged of petty vandalism, stolen property, and even physical altercations, painting a grim picture of life in their once idyllic community. With no end in sight to the nightmare next door, John and Emily began to question whether they would ever find peace again. Their dream home had become a prison, its walls closing in around them with each passing day. And as they packed their belongings and prepared to leave, they couldn't help but wonder what awaited them in their new life, and whether they would ever truly escape the shadow of their nightmare neighbors. Tom had always been wary of his reclusive neighbor, Mr. Wilson. There was something about the way he carried himself, something in the coldness of his gaze that sent shivers down Tom's spine whenever he passed by his house. Despite his reservations, Tom tried to be neighborly, offering a friendly wave or a polite nod whenever their paths crossed. But Mr. Wilson remained aloof and distant, his steely gaze never wavering as he went about his business. One day, while mowing the lawn, Tom noticed something strange out of the corner of his eye, a small door hidden behind a bush near the edge of Mr. Wilson's property. Curiosity getting the better of him, Tom made a mental note to investigate later, when he wouldn't be risking detection. That night, under the cover of darkness, Tom slipped out of his house and made his way over to the hidden door. With a sense of trepidation, he pushed it open and descended into the darkness below. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay, and Tom had to stifle a cough as he made his way deeper into the darkness. His flashlight cast long shadows on the walls, illuminating the way forward as he ventured further into the unknown. As he reached the bottom of the stairs, Tom's heart skipped a beat when he saw what lay before him, a dimly lit room filled with rows of cages, each one containing emaciated figures huddled in the darkness. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare, and Tom felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the true horror of what lay hidden beneath his neighbor's house. Before he could react, he heard footsteps approaching from behind, and he whirled around to see Mr. Wilson standing in the doorway, a sinister smile playing at the corners of his lips. With a wave of his hand, Mr. Wilson signaled for his accomplices to seize Tom, dragging him into the darkness where he would join the ranks of the missing. Terrified and alone, Tom realized too late the true horror lurking next door. And as he descended into the depths of darkness, he knew that he would never escape the nightmare that had become his reality. As Tom struggled against the hands that held him captive, he couldn't help but feel a sense of hopelessness wash over him. The basement seemed to stretch on forever, its walls closing in around him like a suffocating embrace. With each passing moment, Tom's mind raced with thoughts of escape, but the darkness seemed to swallow him whole, leaving him disoriented and disheartened. He tried to call out for help, but his voice echoed off the walls, lost in the void of the basement's depths. Just when he thought all hope was lost, a faint glimmer of light caught his eye. It was coming from a crack in the wall, barely visible amidst the darkness. With renewed determination, Tom wriggled free from his captors and made his way towards the light, his heart pounding in his chest with each step. As he drew closer, he could hear the sound of voices echoing from beyond the wall, faint and muffled but unmistakably human. With a surge of adrenaline, Tom pushed against the cracked mortar, his muscles straining against the weight of the wall. And then, with a final burst of effort, the wall gave way, crumbling to reveal a hidden passageway beyond. As Tom stumbled into the tunnel, he was greeted by the sight of sunlight streaming in through a narrow opening at the other end. With a sense of relief flooding through him, Tom crawled towards the light, his heart soaring with the knowledge that freedom was within reach. And as he emerged into the open air, blinking in the bright sunlight, he knew that he would never forget the horrors that had lurked beneath his neighbor's house, nor the strength and resilience that had carried him through the darkness to the light beyond.